England's biggest, most plentiful, most beautiful buildings are its churches. The buildings are beautiful, but also empty. There are some 16,000 churches in total all over the UK. The owner and janitor, the Church of England, points out that more than a quarter of the church has fewer than 20 worshippers on a Sunday and fewer than 10 in a rural area. The worshipping community of Church of England churches in 2016 was 1.1 million people, of whom 20% were aged under 18, 49% were aged 18 to 69, and 31% were aged 70 or over. Over recent decades, attendance at Church of England church services has gradually fallen. Most key measures of attendance fell by between 10% and 15% between 2006 and 2016. They will regain their focus only if they convert to a communal role. I have spoken to Norwich Historic Church Trust, try to find out what is the current situation of these medieval churches.
The Historic Churches Trust was set up in 1973. We have 31 medieval churches within the walls of Norwich, and that was far too many for the number of people that were living here. So they did a review, the bishop undertook a review, and they decided that only 5 were needed to be used for worship. And we didn't really know what to do with the rest of them, so there was a serious suggestion they should pull them down, and the people in the city said, no, this is not going to happen. So the city council set up the trust to look after them, and the churches now belong to the city, not to the church. The city owns the freehold, and the trust has them on leases, and then we have to lease them out again to people for other uses. Of the 31, we have 18. 9 are still used for worship. The Churches Conservation Trust, which is the national body, has 3 of them.
It was becoming obvious that maintaining 31 churches within city centre was not a good use of church money.
To start with, the city gave us money to keep them up, but that stopped a long time ago because they haven't got any money either. So we have to get the money. Most of the money comes from rental. So if somebody goes into a church, they pay us an annual rent, which is depending on the church, depending on the condition it's in. You know, some of them don't have running water or lavatories even now. Others have got plenty of things. So that will depend, and also what the people can afford is where the money comes from. But for anything, a lot of things we have to get grants as well. So there are local charities that will give us money for various things. Sometimes we only need a few £1,000s, sometimes we need a lot. Occasionally we have to go right to the top, you know, to the Heritage Fund or wherever it is. So it's tricky because it's all part of the national heritage, but no, they don't give money to anybody. Not to us, not to the working churches, not to anybody.
Increasing depopulation caused by people moving into the suburbs had caused congregation to fall in number. Some church has already been closed.
By 1973, when the thing was done, there weren't as many people living in the middle of the city to start with. They'd all been moved out into the suburbs. So anybody who was coming to the churches was coming in quite a long way. And they had very, very small congregations in any case. Very, very few people going to them. And also, of course, people were stopping going to church generally. So it was impossible keeping them standing and keeping them working. What we have to do is make sure that they are kept upright, that they still stand, that they're weathertight, they're watertight. And we find uses for them that are largely in sympathy with the fact that they have been religious buildings. What we're tending to find now is that we have a lot of arts-based activities, like the Puppet Theatre in St James, the Arts Centre at St Swithin. We have an exhibition centre in St Margaret. I've got a music academy at St Martin Oak. It's things like that. We're very much aware that these were community buildings when they were built. And so that's what we'd like them to be now, so that they're open to the community in some way or another.
Some of the churches has alternative uses, and those that did not were generally in a very poor condition. With the suggestion of Mr. Grooves, I have been visited some historic churches which I think has been used successfully over the past few years. St. Pete Hangen would lead the way. In 1936, the church has become a very successful and well-loved museum of church art, and it's also the first church in the country to be used in an alternative and non-religious purpose. Possibly the jewel in the crown of the church cared for by NHCT, St. Gregory was closed in 1971. It has been in use as an antique market now. Many people will come in this building during leisure time. It becomes a happy hunting ground for collectors. St. James was closed in 1972. In 1978, it was converted for use as a puppet theatre, a use which continues.
So this is Norwich Puppet Theatre, which was opened in December 1980, and for 2 years before that a lot of building work was done to the Church of St James. This is a picture of the church as it was. Here you can see the original piers of the building. So this was the original outside wall, and where I am standing now would have been the original doorway into the church. When the Puppet Theatre took it over, it was an empty shell. The major thing is they put in this steel frame which holds up the seating of the theatre. So we added the stairs, and this brings us up into the main theatre space. And for anybody familiar with the church, this is very different. The building, as well as being used for theatre, which we do, it's hired out to other organisations, and also we're licensed to hold weddings here as well. It's a thing about the space, it's a good mixture between has the tradition of the church still here. Like you can see the window arches and the different shapes of the windows, but you have that feel of a theatre, and it's a very intimate space with a good combination.
As we can clearly see, many of those churches had been used in a non-religious way, a museum, a theatre, a shop, or a cafe. So does it mean the secularization of churches has become an inevitable consequence? Is it actually a good thing for Christianity? People have different opinions on it.
The Bible describes church as Jesus as he's joined to the people that believe in him. They're all united together as one thing. So God, who is Jesus, is united to all people that believe in him, and that is the church. So the people themselves are the church. So the building is more a material means by which those people can meet, rather than being important itself. So I would have to go away and you'd calculate where would be best to put your money. If you're giving the money to these churches just to save the buildings because they're beautiful, that's nothing to do with Christianity. Saving beautiful buildings is, but I think I'm very clear that putting lots of money to save the buildings is not supporting Christianity. Putting money towards getting places where people can meet who are Christians for church, to hear and learn about God and what Jesus has done in the Bible is what's important.
I think church building is just a building. It's dead. I mean, I think we're very fortunate that there are many churches in the UK, and so people, as a tourist, people will come in and they admire the church, and they can see a bit of a Bible story and a bit of like, you know, what does Christian believe, so they can sort of have an interest. But then like church is dead, like it's just a building. We Christians believe that church is a group of people, a group of Christian followers, Christ followers. So that's a church, it's a group of people. So in Servants Church, we don't have a church building, but we are a church because we're in a group of us are church.
Well, some church buildings are very beautiful and very special. Like in London, you have building St. Paul's Cathedral, Westminster Abbey, have you heard? These are special in British culture. And they are special because they were put up because the architects had very strong faith in God, and they wanted to build something beautiful for God. That is good, and we can, every time we go into one of these fine buildings, we can remember that it was built to bring glory to God. I mean, this building here, this is different. This is a school, and it's fine to use a school. There's no problem. So you don't have to have a fine building to worship God. You can worship God at home in your bedroom or in your kitchen. You don't have to have a building. But it's a pity to see so many buildings, church buildings, not being used. But it's really because Christianity has declined a little bit in this country.
I think maybe the reason why young people in this country aren't necessarily interested in Christianity is because it can be seen as just a building and a religion that isn't relevant anymore. It's old-fashioned, it's old, it's dying, and it's dead. For me, church isn't necessarily a building, it's a group of people. I think that definitely comes from part of my experience where I've grown up in a church that has never had its own building. We've always met in schools and in centers, and for the first year in my house. So church to me has always been about people. And I've been privileged to be at a church that has a large diversity of people, of young people, of old people from different cultures and different nationalities and different even church backgrounds. So the way that people do church vary differently from person to person. So really, to me, church is about community. And so a building should reflect that community as well. And a church should be open to everyone. No one should ever be excluded from church. Everyone is open to come to church. So I think that's what church means to me. I think sometimes to use it as a shop and to use this puppet is a great way to share the gospel, because I think that's the main thing for me. I want to see churches being used for the gospel, because that's the reason that they're being built. But that doesn't necessarily mean it needs to always be a church. A church is also a great place where you could find play groups, like for moms and their babies. Churches can be a great place to have like cafes and bookstores, like there's one in Norwich. And it could just be a great place to have youth clubs. And it could be a great place where people can receive counseling as well, or it could be rehab centers. So I think a church can be anything, but I think a church most of all needs to demonstrate the gospel, which is that Christ came to save us. So I think we need to demonstrate that in the church, and that can be done through doing puppet shows, through all these different activities. As long as they're explaining and showing the gospel, I think that is just great.
With the rapid development of modern society, church means different from the past. How to adapt to the modern society. How to promote Christianity in a better way. I have spoken to the lead pastor of Savan Church, Mr. John Brown.
There's a lot of things that are happening quickly right now that are changing and that are creating new generation gaps. So as far as the church is concerned, as far as those who profess faith in Jesus are concerned, I think some of the big things that are changing are having to do with sort of not just the use of technology, but the place of technology in the church service. So the church has been updating technology for years, for decades. But what we have now is, in the age of social media, the way the older generation looks at relationships and the younger generation looks at relationships are slightly different. I think both generations equally value relationships, but they pursue relationships and develop relationships in different ways. And so I think that's one of the things that really factors in to how we are a congregation that is multi-generational. So we have younger people that are very comfortable with social media, want to engage in social media, see that as a hub for information, and an older generation that is a bit suspicious of social media, isn't sure what they should do with it. So I think that's one of the big factors.
Church building is beautiful. The people in the churches are also important. More and more people enjoy visiting churches than choose to worship in them. Much of the time, it just closes the door. There is still a quite long way to find a balanced solution. How it can truly benefit the society, not only saving the building, but also promoting the Christianity.